Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. In today's card, I'm using my new Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils. You can see the colors they come with. It's actually a really nice choice of colors. And I'm using the Happy Celebrations new set that came with the new catalog. It's got 3 happies in it. It's a really versatile set, and I'm just going to use it in a really simple way today, mostly to illustrate the watercolor pencils. So I'm going to stamp this on a piece of Canson XL mixed media paper. It's cut to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm stamping it with VersaFine Black Onyx ink. It's a pigment ink, so you can sprinkle it with some clear powder and heat it to set it. My Stampin' Up! Heat tool has 2 settings. I started on the high setting and I let it get really hot before I took it to the paper, and then I put it on the low setting and heated up on the low setting until it was all melted, and it really helps with the warping. I've pulled 5 colors of the rainbow. The first one is Melon Mambo, and I'm going to color directly onto the paper, and you can see that I'm going to follow the outline that's already provided by the stamp. So wherever I see kind of that 3-dimensional look on all of those sides is where I'm going to put my color. And then you'll see I'm putting a little bit of orange on the very right side of the previous letter. And I'm going to do that throughout. So the next time I'm going to take my yellow and notice that I'm putting it just on the sides that hit that striped sort of edge. And then I'll color a little bit on the right hand side of the previous letter. And by coloring this a little bit on the letter before, it helps me to kind of blend all these colors together so it doesn't look like I have a different color on each letter. All right, so now I'm going to apply my water with an Aqua Painter, and I can tell you that these colors really blend well, and they're very loose on the paper. So it doesn't really cling to the paper in any way. It really kind of lays on the top of the paper, and then when you wet it, it loosens it up and it spreads it around really easily. So you can see I start in the light area and then I move into the area that I've colored directly onto the paper. I'm using a really light hand for now since I'm just now experimenting with these colors. And you'll notice that I'm always wiping the color off onto this tissue that I have on my craft table, and that's because the color really pulls up quickly and it spreads. And so by removing the color from my brush, I can start fresh. And then when it's time to do that orange, I'm just going to apply a very little bit of water and just kind of really keep it to the side because I want to preserve the pink that I've already laid down. All right, moving on to the A, I'm going to do the same thing I did, so I'm going to speed this up. And you can see how the water sort of, as it pushes to the edge of the color really darkens up in the on the edge and lightens up as it moves toward the middle. So it really is a nice blend outward as you get to the white area. Inktense pencils have always been my go-to watercolor pencils, so it's interesting to see how these compare. And I want to say, I hate to say this, but I think these blend a little bit better than the Inktense pencils. I guess the best way to describe it is they just are much looser on the paper. So sometimes, you know, when you're using the Inktense pencils, if you press too hard, it kind of is hard to loosen it up and spread it out. And these, I did not have any trouble doing that whatsoever. So I decided to go back in and add a little bit more color so you can layer these up. And you can see that I'm pulling the color directly from the pencil. So that's another thing you can do with these watercolor pencils. But be careful because when you pull it directly from the tip of the pencil, you're going to get a very intense amount of color. So you want to be careful. So start in that dark area and move outward. And I'm just going to take these one at a time and just add a little bit extra color because it was a little bit washed out, and so I wanted it to be a little bit more colorful. So now I'm moving on to the green. Now this is Old Olive, which I was kind of surprised they added this one instead of like a Wild Wasabi, which is more of a brighter green. But it is a pretty green. I wish it was a little bit brighter, but other than that, I'm happy with all the colors that have been included. And they did include a gray and a black as well, which I'm going to use in a second here. You don't have to do this next step, but I thought it would be fun to add a little bit more dimension. So I'm taking the black pencil, and just like I did when I colored the inside, I'm going to go along the other edge of this sort of 3D drawing. So wherever there's that striped 3D kind of block is where I'm going to put some black pencil. And you want to put just a tiny little bit, not much, and you're not going to make it too thick either. So not too much color and not too thick. So I put all the color down first, and then I'm going to go back with my Aqua Painter and blend it out. Now I'm not going to pull it, I'm just going to kind of put some water on top of it, and it's going to spread it out a little bit. And you want to be careful you don't have any like excess drops of color, so keep your tissue handy and wipe off your brush frequently, and just sort of go over the color. It'll loosen it up and kind of keep it in place, because when you think about it, when you have a shadow, you are going to have the form of the letter. So this is just adding a little bit of extra dimension to something that's already dimensional, so I think it looks really good. Now you can see I added a little bit too much black, so you can, if that happens, all you have to do is just add a little bit of water and it'll dilute it, and if it's even too much after that, you can put a tissue on top and blot the whole thing and start over. So it's really easy to work with these pencils. Okay, so now I'm going to continue going here, and you can see that I'm just coloring on top of that black, and I'm not extending it out because I do want it to be really small and subtle. Also notice that I kept the three-dimensional blocks with the lines in them that were part of the stamp. I left those white. And at first I colored them in, but I decided I really actually liked them white better because it made them stand out a little bit more, especially with this black along the outside. So that completes the coloring. I'm going to move on to the rest of the card. This is a sentiment part that is part of the set. I'm going to stamp it with some Versamark ink, and I'll sprinkle some white embossing powder on it. This is black Stampin' Up! Paper. And then I just trimmed it out, and I'm going to cut a banner just by cutting up the middle, and then I go from the corner to the center. I'm going to use my usual hand-drawn outline just because it looks like it's drawn, the actual stamp. So I thought this would blend in nicely with that look. And so I'm just going to take my Stampin' Up! Black marker, and you can see that I just moved my entire arm. I don't move my wrist, I don't move my fingers, I keep everything very still, and I just kind of move my arm toward my body. And I try to be really focused because I colored all of that. But there are ways you can kind of doodle it and make it look better if you do mess it up. All right, so I'm gonna put some Scotch foam tape and adhere it to a Hero Arts black note card, which is white on the inside. And then I wanted to add even more colors, so I decided to add some sequins. Now I pulled from the Fairy Lights and the Moonshine Pack, Simon Says stamp. So the Moonshine Pack is kind of a bunch of all different size clear, and they have really, really tiny ones in there, and I love those a lot, so I added some of those. And the Fairy Lights are kind of a subtle, kind of pastel sort of colors. All right, so I'm going to use my pick-me-up stick, and after I've placed all of my sequins down, that usually takes me like 5 minutes to figure out where I want to place them. And then one at a time, I'll pick them up and use some multi-medium matte to adhere them to the cardstock. And then I'll put some 2A glue pen on this other sentiment. I'll put it right there below the happy. And that is the card for today. So I tried to keep it really simple. I wanted to focus on these watercolor pencils, and I really, really like them a lot. So I highly recommend. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.